I'm being honest, need to have your karma. It's not my job, not my job, not my job, not my job. It's not my job, not my job, it's not my job. Not to take care of you, to be there for you, betray my truth like I used to do. Oh, it's not my job, not my job, not my job, not my job.
So thank you, Riley Hope, for your song, Not My Job. That is an earworm. Always, is it a bad thing? Because that is in my head constantly. And I think it's a good thing, but it's so applicable to what we are going to talk about today. And you can find information about Riley Hope on her Instagram, or I will have the links to all of the places that you can find Not My Job in the show notes. And please follow her on social media. Look for her song wherever you listen to podcasts. So let's start today's episode with a poem from a listener. The poem is called The 1,000 Little Paper Cuts. They say love shouldn't hurt, but here's the thing. It's not the giant wounds that make us sing. It's the tiny paper cuts day after day. I'm just trying to help, they love to say. A sigh here, an eye roll there. Did you really need to buy that pair? A forgotten birthday, a backhanded praise. You look so good for someone your age. The dishes left just one or two. The plans change last minute. Nothing new. The subtle digs about your friends, the jokes that never make amends. 1,000 cuts so small, so slight, each one too tiny for a fight. But add them up day after day and watch your joy just slip away. So here's the healing every nick, to seeing through each little trick. Because paper cuts, though small they be, can slice right through your sanity. So thank you to that listener. And another person sent me in a limerick, and it goes like this. There once was a spouse oh so sweet, whose cuts made my life incomplete. Each jab was so small, you'd see none at all till I found myself knocked off my feet. So you guessed it, we are talking about cuts today, and we are talking the thousands and thousands of cuts. Paper cuts, I don't know, cuts with small knives, cuts with fingernails, you name it, but thousands of tiny cuts, and that they make up what it feels like often to be somebody that's in a relationship with somebody with narcissistic traits and tendencies, or the incredibly emotionally immature. Hey everybody, welcome to Waking Up to Narcissism. I am your host, Tony Overbay. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a host of a variety of podcasts, including The Virtual Couch and The Mind, the Mirror, and Me with my daughter Mackie, Murder on the Couch with my daughter Sid, Love ADHD with Julie Lee, and also one that I haven't talked enough about, the Q&A files. This is a really fun podcast venture that I've done with my friends Jeff and Trisha Jameson. Trisha is a life coach, and Dr. Jeff is a board certified physician, and I am a marriage and family therapist. And you put the three of us together and we get questions from listeners, and then we answer them from our three different, I don't want to say modalities, but just we all have slightly different takes on how we would react or answer certain people's questions. And I bring that up because we've been doing a lot of questions lately around narcissism and emotional immaturity in relationships. And what I love about it is I like coming at it from the therapist angle. Trisha Jameson has a lot of experience in working with people who are in relationships also with people that are emotionally immature and narcissistic. And she has a lot of very, very good practical advice for people that often feel stuck. And she has a really nice way to help you raise that emotional baseline and get in touch with your values, which puts you in a position to be better, your best self when you're interacting with or trying to navigate or figure out your relationship with your narcissistic or emotionally immature partner. And then Dr. Jeff, as a doctor, talks about a lot of the body keeps the score vibes. So I highly recommend you go find that. I'll put the link in the show notes, the Q&A files. And then I'm planning on running a bonus episode here on Waking Up to Narcissism in the not too distant future, but I would recommend go subscribe to that right now. So before we get to the cut examples, and we have a lot of them today, including a new segment that I am calling the speed round of Death by 1,000 Cuts, I would really like to invite you all to jump on board my train of thought. And you're getting on a couple of stops back from the actual destination that we're headed. So bear with me because we're going to go through probably a little bit of a landscape that you may not recognize, but I hope you can trust me when I say that I think you really will appreciate the destination. So we're going to talk about shooting free throws and basketball, something that while I can imagine not everybody has done, but I'm hoping you've maybe even watched somebody else do it. And if you've thought, yeah, I could do that, or why aren't they better at that if that's what they continually practice or that's their job? So the brilliant thing about free throws is that you can spend years mastering the art of shooting free throws. You can read about free throws. You can dive into the theory, the ideal arc, the perfect follow through, the physics, the spin, the trajectory, and you can watch endless hours of game footage of legends everywhere from Rick Barry, who had a very unconventional but very deadly underhand shot, AKA the granny shot, Or we go to modern day, somebody like Steph Curry, whose effortless precision just seems almost robotic. And it's the same thing. It's effortless. It's every time. And he gets the same result over 90% of the time. And if you ever try to get good at free throws, you can practice tirelessly. You can perfect your form under the quiet hum of the fluorescent gym light, the ball whispering through the net over and over and over again. And when you find your groove, and I've been in this place where you think, I might not ever miss again, until then immediately you clank one off the back of the iron. But now let's talk about taking those skills into a real game when it matters more. How can you truly understand what you'll actually do when you're truly tested? Because the theory may make perfect sense to you. You can replicate the conditions of fatigue in a game, late fourth quarter, when you won't even know if you have enough gas left in the tank. So practice, you find yourself just running drills and lines until your legs just scream and your breath is coming out in shallow gasps. And then you step to the line and you're going to practice sinking shot after shot, even when you're fatigued. And if you know where you'll be playing, you can even familiarize yourself with the court and where the big game will happen. And you can shoot free throws in the exact spot that you'll stand. You can imagine and visualize, which is a wonderful thing, the roar of the crowd. And at that moment, you might think, okay, no, I think I'm good. I think I've got this. But then the moment actually comes. So I got to do my best to set the stage here. It's a championship game. Score is 87-86. You're down, but you were fouled while taking a shot. But time had expired. Suddenly, the weight of it all is on your shoulders. And you step to the line, and it's actually not the gym that you know anymore. Maybe you're on the road. You're deep in enemy territory, and you're surrounded by thousands of fans who want nothing more than to see you fail. You're cramping. The crowd is a living thing, a mix of jeers and boos, and it's crashing over you in these giant waves. And they even brought props, and they're waving signs and inflatable noodles, and there's a sea of bright swirling colors, and they are all absolutely meant to distract you. And you're in a gym that has the transparent glass backboard, so you can actually see the faces of the opposing crowd. And fans are screaming insults, and their eyes are just gleaming with insanity. And they know what's at stake for their team. You have to miss. This is the part where they feel like they are actually the sixth man. They are part of their team's success. And you know this isn't just a game, it's your legacy. You miss, you're the scapegoat. You're the one who let the team down. And sure, there were hundreds of plays that led up to this moment, but only the diehard fan will ever remember any of the plays that others maybe failed to execute. But pretty much everybody's going to remember the championship game when time expired, and you're that guy that either made the free throws or you missed them. So you make them, you are a hero. You're immortalized in school lore. Your name is whispered with reverence in future locker room pep talks. You miss, and people will actually move their children to the other side of the street when they see you coming, because they're afraid that whatever it is that caused you to choke in that moment might actually start to rub off on them or their kids. So there you are again. Your palms are just slick with sweat. The ball feels heavier than it ever has before. You bounce it once or twice, and that is a loud echo, and it sounds louder than the crowd. But your heart, that's even pounding even louder. That's what you hear. The rim looks small. The distance actually looks very long, longer than it's ever been. And you can feel the weight of your teammates' stares and the burning hope in their eyes. And you can hear your coach's mantra ringing in your ears. Focus on the mechanics, kid. Trust the process. But you have never been in this situation before. Yeah, there's a process. You want to trust it. You practice it. But this isn't practice. This isn't the controlled environment where you train so diligently. This is raw, unpredictable life. And your body starts shaking with exhaustion. And your mind fights to block out the noise and the stakes and the crushing fear of failure. All that preparation, all that practice brought you right here. The practice can only carry you so far, because that moment demands something that you actually can't simulate. It requires composure under pressure and the ability to quiet the storm in your head and then summon your very best when everything around you is chaos. And it's in that moment that you realize that really no amount of preparation could fully prepare me for this very moment. There's an acceptance there. And you take a really deep breath, and the crowd starts to get even louder. And then you shoot. So I'm very curious. Did you make it? Because whether or not you made the shot in your mind, I don't know, might actually say something about how you feel about yourself. But the point I really wanted to emphasize is that there is a real gap between preparation and real life execution. And I'm saying that with, check that out. Isn't that fascinating? And more, I'm hearing from listeners and clients who are understanding they know the 5 rules of interacting with a narcissist. They know how to raise their emotional baseline. They know how to get their PhD in gaslighting. They might even get out of unproductive conversations, and they've set healthy boundaries, and they know that a boundary It's not an ultimatum. It is a me thing. If you do this, then I will leave. And they also finally embrace the fact that they can't give this other person the aha moment or the epiphany. And let's say that they're truly starting to appreciate and they're practicing more and more of the 4 pillars of a connected conversation. They're understanding now that in a narcissistic or emotionally immature relationship, they're not necessarily assuming good intentions, that this person is not trying to hurt them, but no, it's part B of that first pillar, where they're saying, okay, there's a reason why this person's showing up the way they are, because they're emotionally immature, because this is the way that they feel like they have to communicate. And then they're embracing pillar 2. I can't tell that person that they're wrong or that's ridiculous, but I do, and I'm allowed to think that it is wrong and it is ridiculous, but my goal is to stay in this ball game. So I go to pillar 3, questions before comments. Tell me why you said that. Tell me where you were headed with that. What's that like for you? In pillar 4, I'm going to stay present. I'm not going to go into a victim mindset. I'm not going to say, you're right, I'm the world's worst human being, because I don't need that person to rescue me, because I'm starting to learn that I'm okay and I know how to rescue myself. So we've got those 4 pillars and the 5 rules of interacting with a narcissist. And we also have people that are telling me that they're really understanding and appreciating the practice of being differentiated. You know, having a strong, flexible sense of self, of knowing who I am without needing someone else to tell me, and not necessarily seeking external validation every chance I get, which leads to them being able to calm their own mind, quiet their own heart, and soothe their own anxiety, which then allows them to show up even more grounded, more present, not overreacting, not playing small, and then understanding that discomfort is this opportunity for me to grow. And dare I even say that they are starting to learn how to construct their crucible in those moments where they reach gridlock and they know that their partner is not going to have that aha moment, but they also know what is best for them, the things that they can say from a place of true integrity, even when their emotionally immature and narcissistic partner is not only not going to reciprocate, but when the information that you are realizing you're willing to die on a hill for may in fact be used as a very attack surface against you. But then you get in that big game of life, you are grounded and you are calm. And the narcissistic or emotionally immature partner in your life finds new buttons to push. Well, I'll tell the kids that you wanted this divorce, or the narcissistic parent says, I really don't like a lot of the parts of you that I'm seeing, and you just feel crushed. That's your parent. Where do you think you learn these things? Well, I feel for you, because you can learn everything you can about almost anything. But when you are in the game of life, you need your reps to get better. Recently, a client of mine who has been doing so amazingly well in their healing journey was met with a very, very bad episode of being berated by a family member, and they were grounded until they weren't. And then they asked me what was wrong with me, which again, nothing, that they were in that big game of life and they had never been in that very situation as them before, hearing the things that they were hearing. So check that out. Give themselves some grace, because you were aware of how you were showing up in that moment until your amygdala became hijacked. And at that point, it was a little bit too late. So let's start with some grace, no shame. You're not broken, you're human. Let's review the game film. What am I pretending not to know? Did I really think that this person would have that aha moment? Where was I aware of what was happening, that I was getting emotionally elevated? And why wasn't I able to leave? Because I thought I had a clear boundary in my mind. If they continue to yell, then I will leave. Well, as I'm saying this to you now, it might sound like it should just be that easy. But I want you to know that I know it's not, because I truly believe that you can't guide others to places that you haven't explored first yourself. And I want you to know that I create the content that I do, and I work with the population of clients that I do, because I have and continue to be exploring the places that I hope to help lead people to. And I see you. I don't know what it feels like to be you in your situation, but I've had many, many situations, even very recently, where I am differentiated until I'm not, where I'm a few pillars into my 4 pillars, and then they are just suddenly gone. And in those moments, I do see my own emotional immaturity on absolute full display. Check that out. As a matter of fact, yesterday, I pull up to a store, let my daughter, her boyfriend, and my wife out to grab something to make some cookies. And I am far off to the side of the store, but I'm not parked. I am up front. It is busy. I don't believe I'm in the way. They're just grabbing 1 or 2 things. And my window is rolled down. Thank you, Arizona, in mid-November. I see you. And a guy walks by and says very passive aggressively under his breath, that's not a parking place. And I impulsively yell without looking up from my phone, thank you. Why? I don't know, because I did, because the synapses in my brain fired and engaged with my vocal cords, and my inner jerk impulsively and emotionally immaturely yelled, thank you. Not smart. I don't know who this person was. And had he returned, I was fully prepared to take ownership. My bad. I could pull in a space. I think I'm special and that this is a unique situation, which it truly isn't. So your comments are not only good and fair, good sir, but true. But he didn't come back. And I shared with my family, to which my wife said, isn't that a little bit immature? To which, of course, I said, nee, 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 nee. I really didn't say that. I said, yeah, that was more than a little bit mature. It was extremely immature. So own it and do better. I really want to do better. With that in mind, I would like to invite you, whether it is your first time or you're returning, to check out the Waking Up to Narcissism premium question and answer episodes on Apple Podcasts, but even more so, my new Patreon account. So just head over to patreon.com/virtualcouch, and I'll have that in the show notes, but there you will find bonus content from both the Waking Up to Narcissism podcast and the Virtual Couch podcast, plus more. This truly brings me back to why I have shared that free throw analogy. Because on Patreon, I've decided to open up more about my own personal experiences with the narcissist and the emotionally immature individuals in my own life, as well as my own emotional immaturity. Those challenges, the failures, and the moments that have shaped not just the content that I create, but also, honest to goodness, my personal growth. Because as much as I believe in studying and in reading and in preparing, you do ultimately have to get your reps in. And for me, those reps have often involved learning through failure. So that when somebody in my life found just the right button or a combination of buttons to press, and all of a sudden I completely lose my cool, that is an opportunity for me to grow. And that is where I grow. Absolutely. And I have confidence that I will grow from those experiences. Those are the stories that I don't typically share, except occasionally with a client who assumes that just because I can articulate these concepts and say these words that I must have perfect execution. Spoiler alert, I don't. And that, listeners, is perfectly okay. So if you are curious or you want to dive deeper into these stories and more, then check out the Patreon link in the show notes, or feel free to reach out to me directly at contact@tonyoverbay.com. And Patreon will be where your questions will be answered and where I'll share the kind of true vulnerability that doesn't always make it into the podcast. And I'm actually really excited to share more of that from a very vulnerable place. So let's get back to those cuts. So I think it is very safe to say, with this being the 8th installment of the Death by 1,000 Cuts series, that this metaphor really captures what it feels like to be in a relationship with somebody who is emotionally immature or narcissistic. This feeling of these death by 1,000 cuts, these little cuts where eventually you bleed out. And I think on several occasions, I try to explain the origin story of this phrase. And what I'm very curious about is if even my finding of the origin story has changed over time. Have I confabulated that narrative? The phrase actually it's a pretty intense origin story, because it actually comes from a ancient Chinese execution method called, I think it's Ling Qi, which was used up until 1905, where, well, you can probably guess from the name of what it's involved, pretty grim stuff. But here's why it is such a perfect metaphor for toxic relationships, and why I think it is that these episodes of the podcast have so many more downloads than the others, because they just resonate. They make sense. This is where a lot of people start to realize that they're not crazy, that they're human, and they're not in a great relationship. They don't feel so alone. So think about a paper cut. And true story, I opened a cardboard box a few days ago, and I cardboard box cutted me under a fingernail, and it still hurts. Man, that was too big. I think that defeats the whole purpose of the concept of paper cuts. But think about a paper cut. One paper cut, no big deal, right? It can be very annoying, sure, but you probably don't mention it to anybody unless you're really looking for validation. But imagine getting paper cuts every single day in the same spots over and over and over, because that's what these relationships start to feel like. Each little dig, each subtle eye roll, each forgotten promise on their own, they seem small. And that's why it's really hard to explain to friends or family why you are just hurting so much in your relationship. Because you try to explain it, and often it comes out, well, I mean, they sighed really heavily when I got excited about my promotion. And people look at you like, and that's it? Just a sigh, isn't it? But it's the thousands of sighs and the countless times that they've dampened your joy and dismissed your feelings, or made you second guess yourself, or made everything all of a sudden about them. That's what makes this form of emotional abuse so insidious, because it's death by 1,000 little paper cuts, each one so small enough to dismiss, but together, they will bleed you dry. You will bleed out. So today, I'm sharing stories from listeners who've experienced this, because sometimes putting words to these small wounds, I think, is one of the very first steps to healing them. And all of the names and situations have been changed and I've been given permission from those who have shared. So let's jump into the world of family events. This person says, every time we visit my parents, which is about once a month, my husband creates this cloud of tension. Last Thanksgiving was typical. He spent about 45 minutes in the shower when we needed to leave, even though I'd reminded him of our departure time repeatedly. And then when I knocked on the door, he said, hey, can't somebody get ready in peace? You seem to get all the time that you want. That he couldn't find his shoes, which took another 10 to 15 minutes. And he sure acted very lackadaisical trying to find them. And we arrived an hour late. And then he spent the entire dinner sighing heavily, checking his watch, looking at his phone. And when my mom asked, hey, would you like some more? Then he muttered, I guess so, while scrolling on his phone. Later, a sister of mine texted me saying, hey, is everything okay? Because you could really feel the tension. And so then the next day, when I mentioned how his behavior affected everybody, he said, oh, I think you're the one that was being too sensitive. I think everything was fine. And that he was maybe just a little bit tired, but you took it way too far. Well, let's talk about an undermining parent example. Another person said that her mother-in-law has this way of making So another guy wrote in and said that my mother-in-law has this way of making my wife feel so small that it's so subtle that it's really hard to call out. At our daughter's birthday party a couple of months ago, my wife spent hours making a homemade cake, which she's very good at. And then when my mother-in-law arrived, she immediately said, oh, honey, did you make that yourself? I would have ordered you one from that nice bakery downtown. You're just so busy with work. You shouldn't have to do all of this. And then she spent the next hour telling everybody about the elaborate parties that she used to throw for my wife and for her daughters. But if you ask my wife and my sister-in-laws about that, they say that that was not the case at all, that their parties were constantly just this thing that was put together last minute. And then the mom would continually say, and then my mother-in-law would continually complain throughout the remainder of the day that she wasn't appreciated for all the hard work that she had done. I have a couple of examples that were sent in about the workplace, which I think are really fascinating too. This person said, I led this big account presentation a couple of weeks ago, but somehow then my name was left off of a follow-up meeting invitation. But I heard about it and I went to the meeting. Now, when I arrived, my boss acted really surprised. Oh, did you want to join? They said. I thought you were busy with some other projects. But then the portion of the presentation came where that was clearly my part of the presentation. So I tried to jump in, but she interrupted me so many times and gave me helpful corrections. And then later I overheard her talking to her boss, the VP of the company, just loud enough for everybody else to hear. Do you think maybe that account is a little bit too much and too complex for somebody at her level? And so then when I finally got the courage to confront my boss, she said, hey, I think you probably heard that wrong. And I just want to make sure that we succeed. It's a team effort after all. This person said, yesterday I was texting my sister about her divorce when my husband walked by and he just casually glanced at my screen. And he said, so how's your sister doing? Even though I had not mentioned who I was texting. At dinner, he brought up how funny it is that some people just text all day and then asked me if I'd been on my phone much today at all. And when I went to take a work call later on in a different room, he walked by twice with laundry. He doesn't do the laundry. He could have easily done that later. And this morning he mentions that my screen time seems to be a little bit higher lately, as if he's been checking. If I mention this to people around me, they're going to say, well, just tell him that, hey, mind your own business. Or, well, shouldn't you guys be pretty transparent anyway? But if you have experienced this death by 1,000 cuts, I think you can see that this is just his way of just continually letting her know that he is checking on her and that he doesn't approve of the things that she's doing without having a mature adult conversation. Here's another one. A person said, I got a promotion last week after 2 years of what I felt was very hard work. When I came home and I told my husband, his first response was, hey, that's nice. I guess they didn't need to fill that position quickly since another colleague of mine had left. At a dinner with friends later that week, when one of my friends congratulated me about the promotion, he immediately jumped in with a short story about his own promotion from a few years ago. And then later he said, you're really lucky that they didn't check your references from your old job. And then meanwhile, he tells everybody who will listen about his very minor sales victories at work. It was like he just couldn't let any of it be about me. This one I put in the weaponized routines category. A person said, I have to leave for work at 7:30 sharp to make my train. My wife knows this. Last Wednesday was pretty typical. She got into the shower at 7, using all the hot water, taking 25 minutes, despite my knocking. And when I mentioned it, she said, you should wake up earlier if you're so worried about getting there on time. So that evening, I had just finished deep cleaning the kitchen when she came in, made a sandwich, and left crumbs everywhere, and left a knife out, and butter was everywhere. And when I sighed, she said, I'll clean it later, but she doesn't. And this happens at least 2 or 3 times a week. And it feels like I'm keeping score, but I'm starting to lose my mind. Here's a financial manipulation example. My dad insists on paying for my new laptop when mine broke, even though I said that I can handle it. Last week, when I disagreed with him about a career choice that I wanted to make, he casually mentioned, man, I hope that laptop's working out. That was a really big investment. And then yesterday, he took the family out to dinner for everybody. He ordered expensive wine for all of us and then made a point of showing my sister and me the bill before paying, saying, it's really good that I can still provide for my kids. And then later, he commented on my clothes looking, quote, discount store quality while showing off a new watch of his. I've got a few examples of co-parenting. Just yesterday, I had told our son no more sweets before dinner because he'd already had a cookie. But as soon as I left the room, I heard my wife say, don't worry, one small piece of chocolate's not going to hurt. We just won't tell Dad. He's being a little bit strict today. At bedtime, when I said 8:30 was lights out, she said, maybe just one more show. Mom's not as mean about bedtime. And then this morning, he woke up a little bit early. And so she let him play video games before school, something that we've agreed on over and over was only for weekends. And then he told me, and then even my little son told me that I was overreacting then when I brought it up. Okay, I have a lot of them that I want to throw in the speed round category, and I would love to, and I'll comment about some of these more. So let's first take on family events. One woman said, my husband accidentally spilled wine on my sister's chair at a holiday dinner, but then spent 20 minutes very loudly cleaning it up while we were trying to open the presents. It was as if he was trying to make this point that nobody was helping him. So I think this one's really fascinating because it just is about, everything needs to be about this person, even if it's them that spilled the wine. And I can only imagine that I wonder what the excuses were about it. Maybe the sister-in-law didn't have coasters out, or a little kid ran by, or maybe a brother-in-law filled the glass up too high. But regardless, when the wine was spilt, why couldn't he then just clean up the wine and not make it about him and not huff and puff? And this is where I go down the path of the emotionally immature, because if then he really was upset because people were going ahead and opening presents and he couldn't be as big of a participant because he had spilled the wine, then this is where we need to use our big kid words and be able to say, hey, my bad. I didn't mean to spill that. Obviously that's on me. Even if I want to ask, can I get a little help, or can you guys just hang on a second? I'll clean this up and I would love to be a part of the present opening. The next person said, my wife answers work calls during family photos, making everybody retake them multiple times. When she was finally confronted about it, she said, sorry, but my clients need me. And if you look in this world of emotional immaturity, and I'm not saying that she doesn't have a very important job, but this is where I think that the differentiation piece comes in. If you are trying to show up in a more emotionally mature and emotionally consistent way, is that if you know that you have to make phone calls, can you now have that personal boundary of that? If people call during this time, then I will get back to them later. Or if I really do need to, if there's a life and death situation, which I guess you're the only one that knows, maybe you're a world famous neurologist and you've already said that when you get to this part of the brain surgery and I'm the only person that understands what's going to happen, then maybe give me a call. Although I would maybe suggest to the world renowned brain surgeon that they don't go and that they have that difficult conversation with the family and say, I am so sorry, but I don't want to interrupt this family time with this potential part of the brain surgery. I think I've gone too far with this example, but hopefully you can see where I'm going from a healthy relationship place where either I need to be able to set that boundary and I will deal with work things after, because hopefully you can tell that this starts to feel like this person is saying, hey, I just need everybody to validate me and know that I am very important and that I will possibly have to step out of this situation that we are all here for any minute. As if and then you guys won't appreciate me enough because now you're complaining, even though, see the aforementioned comment that I'm very important. Another person said, during our son's graduation, he spent 30 minutes looking for parking while we saved seats. Oh. Okay, this one, a wife said that my husband, during our son's graduation, spent 30 minutes looking for parking while we saved seats, missing the whole processional. Then when my mom asked where he was, then he blamed me for not giving clear directions to the venue. And the taking ownership of something, I think, is one of the biggest challenges to those who are in relationships with emotionally immature or narcissistic people. Because if you get somewhere late, it is far more mature, consistent, trustworthy. It is far more intimate and not from a validation seeking standpoint to even just take ownership and say, oh man, I should have prepared sooner. And I will drop you guys off, but film the processional for me if I don't make it, because that's on me. Or I'm willing to drop you guys off, park the closest place I can, and I will do a dead sprint to make it there on time. But that is a me thing. I will take ownership of that. And I think one of the difficult things when working with the emotionally immature is you can watch somebody, if it's that guy, let's say I'm working with a guy in that situation, where then instead of him just sitting with the discomfort, maybe acknowledging, maybe this is something that I don't know because I'm getting really defensive, that I will often hear just this laundry list of then excuses. Well, this isn't the first time that that's happened. They don't take my emotions into consideration very often, and they don't even appreciate me. And my wife doesn't want to be intimate with me. And my kids, they just sit on their phones all the time. And that's where you start to see how difficult it can be in trying to interact with the emotionally immature narcissistic person, because they just deflect. They don't want to sit with any of that discomfort, where in reality, learning how to just take ownership and say, man, that is my bad. And I that would be difficult if that the entire family now was worried about how I'm going to show up when I walk back into the graduation. And I think what's so difficult about these things too is whether it's a graduation, whether it's a wedding, whatever the celebration is, and we're coming up on Thanksgiving and the holidays and Christmas and you name it. And so often you hear about the narcissistic or emotionally immature person, I was going to quote, air quote, but say ruining a holiday or a big event. And it's because they all of a sudden feel like, okay, people aren't paying enough attention to me, or look at all the things I have done to make this thing happen. Where I want the emotionally mature person to recognize, and this is where you get that internal validation. I'm grateful that I played a role that allowed this to happen. Maybe it's gifts at Christmas. Maybe it's having the entire family come in at Thanksgiving. And I've worked hard and been able to afford the things that have allowed people to come to town and show up together. But do I need a trophy for it? Do I need a medal? Do I need a plate of cookies for it? If I do, first of all, acknowledge it. Oh, check this out. I'm noticing that I really am wanting people to say, you're the best, because just the awareness of that is a big step. This is one that I think is pretty funny too. A guy wrote in and said that my wife volunteered to make deviled eggs for Christmas dinner and then forgot the paprika that my grandmother always uses, which I was never a big deviled egg guy. And I still am not quite sure if I am or not, but I do know what the paprika is. I think it's the little red stuff that goes on top of it. But I love it because my grandmother made those deviled eggs as well, as did my mom. And so I can find myself in the same spot that this guy is. So his wife forgets the paprika that he said my grandmother always uses. And that sparked a 20-minute discussion about how now all of a sudden she wanted to make it her own, as if she were being judged by Randy from American Idol. That's a really funny piece of business right there, by the way, if you're an old school American Idol fan. But he said, versus admitting that she either forgot the paprika, or maybe she doesn't even like paprika, but she literally can't admit to anything that she possibly did or got wrong. And yes, I will allow the all or nothing statement because this is what this listener wrote in. But I think maybe we're starting to see a little bit of a theme of today of ownership and accountability, and that it must feel scary to the emotionally immature to say, man, I forgot, or I'm not sure, or that's on me. But if you're a person who has gotten okay with the discomfort and you are starting to take ownership for the things that you do in a relationship, I want to tell you that can be so empowering, because you can often feel the people in the room that are disappointed. And so then what do I do with the discomfort of that disappointment? So typically I want to shift blame, or I want to play the victim card. Man, you guys, I've just been having such a rough day. And then the car, and it's so hot, and I was just worried. And then people are like, hey, it's okay. Versus me being able to say, my bad. I totally forgot to plan earlier, or I thought that it wouldn't take this long. Because then people can still be allowed to have their feelings. They can still be angry, and that's okay. And now you're making space for that because I am okay. I think that's one of the most powerful parts about being differentiated, is knowing that I am okay. Starting to learn that the things that I'm doing, the things that I'm thinking, the things that I'm feeling, the life that I'm experiencing is my experience. And yeah, I am reacting. I do say thank you out the window at a passerby who mumbles under their breath that I'm not in a parking place. But very quickly, I had to acknowledge I'm actually not in a parking space. And I want to say, well, it didn't impact him, but that's me wanting to project my discomfort onto him and then have him take ownership of it. Where is there truth in what he's saying? Absolutely. Can I grow through that? I think I can. I'm still struggling a little bit with whether I would do that again in the future, because I don't want to do it just because I felt bad. I want to do it because maybe those feelings came up in me, and that allowed me an opportunity to do a little self-confrontation and growth. Let's jump into the undermining parent-in-law. Every visit, this person says that their mother-in-law says to her, "Oh, you're still breastfeeding. That's kind of funny. My children were all sleeping through the night at 6 months and with formula, and they're very healthy now." This person also said that she brings backup outfits for our kids to family events just in case what mommy picked wasn't warm enough, and makes sure and lets my kids know that all the time. She said she also rearranges our kitchen cabinets during visits, saying, "I just want to help you be more organized like your sister-in-law is." And then sends pictures to our family group chat showing how she fixed our home and reorganized my cabinets, which then I need to go back and put the way that I want them later. And she also said that at most every birthday, she brings up how she saved all of her children's artwork in special albums and she scrapbooked while glancing at our kids' artwork, which is magnetized to the fridge, and says, do you ever organize these, or what do you do with these? Do your kids actually like this? Okay, let's go back to the world of professional sabotage. One person said that a person in their group carbon copies my boss on just routine emails with little subtle corrections to everybody else with the phrase, "just keeping everybody in the loop." But my boss doesn't have the courage to respond back and tell this employee how annoying they think it is, like they are telling me. So I'm seeing emotional immaturity in the workplace from a boss and a colleague. Another person said that someone in their office takes personal calls on their speakerphone right next to my desk, and we are in an open cube farm during client meetings that I'm having, saying, "I'm sorry, is this bothering you?" And then at every project meeting, she restates my ideas 5 minutes after I share them, slightly reworded. And the team now says, "Yeah, that's a great idea, Barbara," when they were actually my suggestions initially, but I feel like I'm going to be a baby if I try to speak up for myself. Another person said, Another person said, "My boss always schedules important client meetings for 8 a.m., knowing that I drop my kids off at school. So when I arrive at 8:15, he's already, 'Sorry, we had to start without you.'" And then I had some speed rounds of phone surveillance as well. So here's what's difficult is, if isn't that funny? I was going to say, if this woman, and look at me being gender stereotyped, this person is talking about their boss is scheduling these meetings at 8 a.m., knowing that this person drops their kids off at school. So I do not know if the person, who this person is that is dropping the kids off at 8:15. But what I would love to share, but what I might encourage, is this is where that crucible concept comes in. Is this a hill that I'm willing to die on? Because if so, then I need to be able to express myself from a place of integrity. But I can see the difficulty here, because if I'm saying, "Hey, I find it difficult that you are continually scheduling meetings at 8 a.m. and I've been very clear and it's been okayed by upper management that I do drop my kids off on the way to work and that I arrive at 8:15 and that is on time. So would you be able to schedule the meetings a little bit later at 8:15? So that's this person doing it from a place of integrity, even if it's not reciprocated or even if it's not met well. But I think one of the most difficult things about being differentiated and creating this crucible in the job place is that there's an acceptance that it actually might get worse for this employee, which I think is so difficult. Because here's where I think sometimes people run into this battle of, are they truly operating from a place of integrity if they are just continually stuffing their feelings and emotions, and then they are playing into this scapegoat role in the workplace and being made to feel small just so that this other person can take that one-up position. So at times there has to be an acceptance that might, and I hate to say this, but it could cost one their job if they want to truly come from a place of integrity. But then it comes back to that, what is their integrity worth? And I realize that's very easy for me to say as somebody that works for myself. So I know that that's difficult. So let's go back to the world of phone surveillance, and we'll go through these speed round. This person said, gifts me his phone accessories that my husband gave me phone accessories for Christmas that let him see my screen from across the room. And he said, "I just wanted you to be comfortable." Never heard that one before. Another one said, sets up find my phone on my device for emergencies and then checks my location constantly. Whenever my phone buzzes, he asks, "Who's that?" casually while walking behind my chair. If I don't answer immediately, he'll hover, pretending to be cleaning something nearby. Another guy said, she memorized my phone password accidentally by watching me enter it, and then said, "You know my memory. It's just something that now I can't get out of my head." But then mentions all the notifications that she saw when I was in the shower. "Oh, your mom messaged you from earlier." And I go back to, again, this is a funny one because in emotionally healthy, connected, mature relationships, I'm a big fan of people having their passwords to their partner's phones. And is there anything in my phone that I'm worried that somebody is going to see or go through? No. And if you are, then that is maybe something that you can do a little bit of self-confrontation on. Are you willing to take ownership of the fact that, hey, there are some things on there that I'm not ultimately comfortable with you seeing? And then knowing a good reason why, because I also believe that people are allowed to have privacy. But when you're in a mature adult relationship, then hopefully you can see this navigation, and hopefully you can see where that can be difficult, because why do I feel like there's something that I can't share with my partner? Now, in my case, then it might be a client message, some sort of, because if it is something that is necessary to have some privacy around, then can I calmly and comfortably state the reasons why I need this privacy? And then if my partner gets really upset, I can empathetically understand why that would be difficult. Because then at that point I'm saying, hey, I know it might be difficult, but I would love your trust on this right now. But if it gets too uncomfortable for you, then let me know and we can try to have a more mature conversation. And we can continue to have conversations around this, because I really want you to feel heard and understood. But there are just certain things that I need to protect because of whatever that reason is. I put these under the category of achievement diminishment, because I think there were several of these. A person said, when I won Employee of the Year, they always give it to, a person said that when I won an Employee of the Year award, that my spouse said, yeah, they always give it to a newcomer to just boost their morale. Another person said, after I finished my first marathon, my spouse said, hey, it's great you finished, even if it wasn't under the 4 hours, like I think the average marathon is, which is, I don't know if there's any truth to that or not. I know there's a magical 4-hour mark, but there's nothing productive about saying, oh, I thought you were going to go faster. Or, well, is that even a good time? Because this is a moment to just celebrate somebody's accomplishment or their achievement. Another person said, when I finished my master's degree, she told everybody at the celebration dinner about how when she was younger, she had actually gotten accepted to Harvard, but chose to raise a family instead, ending with, but your online program, honey, that sounds nice too. Another person said, after I had some artwork displayed in an opening at a gallery, he spent the drive home talking about how his friend who makes real money from art by doing corporate logos is the one that really has the art game figured out instead of just doing paintings. Here's one under weaponized routines. Here's a speed round under weaponized routines. He returns empty milk cartons to the fridge. Well, I thought you want to recycle it yourself. Or this guy said, my wife sets all the clocks 15 minutes fast, quote, to help me be more punctual, but then doesn't tell me which ones, because she says that if I'm always guessing, then I'll be more aware and more alert. Every time I have an early meeting, she does a face mask routine in her only bathroom, taking 45 minutes because, quote, skincare is important. She works from home and she has no morning meetings. Another person said he constantly forgets to transfer laundry to the dryer only when I need my work clothes, saying, just buy more clothes if you're so worried about it. And then financial manipulation. These get tough, because the financial piece I know is a big reason why some people do feel like they have to stay in relationships. And there is an acceptance there for some. That is most likely where one has to operate from as long as they need to in order to try to get their, I want to say, affairs in order, but I feel like that's something from maybe an 80s Bond villain movie. One guy said she offers to split dinner. One guy said she offers to split dinner, then she forgets her wallet. When I pay, she tells everybody about the expensive purse that I bought. He offers to split dinner, but then he forgets his wallet. So then when I pay, he tells everybody about the expensive purse that I bought for myself last month. And he says, yeah, I could just never justify spending that much on myself. This next one is one that the comments on Venmos are really fascinating to me, because I almost feel like as much as I use the service myself, the comments, other than trying to make funny jokes about them, I'm not really sure if they're very helpful or very productive. And this woman said, he Venmos me for his half of utilities with public comments like, again, and a little crying face emoji, or supporting your expensive taste and leaving all the lights on. And hey, I didn't know we hated the environment so much, visible to all of our friends. Tags me in social media posts about budgeting. Oh, thought of you when I saw this guide for overspenders. Again, doing this in the public forum. Announces my salary at family gatherings. Hey, we're all family here, no secrets. I wish I knew more on that one. The salary thing is a really fascinating one because I've worked with people that have wanted to pretend that they do better than they do, except for when it becomes a matter of someone else in the family needing something. And now all of a sudden, oh no, I don't do that well. I do really well when it's time to be admired for doing well. But then if there's actually somebody that might need some help, just make sure we don't do that. Co-parenting undermining. When I enforce our no iPad at restaurants rule, she slips our daughter her phone under the table whispering, just don't hold it up where daddy can see. Here's another one that says, after I spend an hour helping with homework, he comes in saying, let daddy help. Mom's better at the creative stuff than math, despite I'm literally an accountant. Buys noisy toys right before bedtime, but daddy lets them play drums before sleep. I don't know if that one's literal, but I think we can see the point. Or mom's rules don't count at fun dad's house while giving them energy drinks at 8 p.m. Those both came from the same person. So either that is a pretty interesting household, or maybe they have a penchant for grandiosity, shall we say. So what did we learn today? I think that the first big takeaway, the power of patterns. Because what we saw, I think, in all these stories about single incidents is that there's a relentless repetition. You know, the snarky comments about your coffee order isn't just about coffee. The slow walk to the car before your family event isn't just about being late. These are tactical behaviors that create an environment of just constant tension and constant anxiety and self-doubt. So what are some things you can do? I do recommend start keeping a simple journal. And I used to say not to build a case, but a little bit of case building, but more to recognize patterns. Because when you see these behaviors written down, you'll start noticing how predictable they can be and maybe sometimes strategic. And that helps you move from maybe I'm being too sensitive to, oh, okay, this is a pattern. And I think that maybe this is more of a pattern of control. And maybe the second takeaway today would be the weaponization of plausible deniability. Because notice how nearly every example that we talked about today could be explained away. I was just joking, or you're reading too much into things, or the old classic, that's not what I meant. This isn't accidental. It's a strategy that keeps you questioning your own reality, which then inflicts yet another cut and helps. And unfortunately, you end up wasting a tremendous amount of your emotional calories, emotional energy, and time trying to make sense of nonsense and wondering what is wrong with you when nothing is. You're just trying to figure out how to improve a relationship, but you're doing it blindfolded or with both arms tied behind your back. So what can you do? I really want you to start trusting your body's response. Because your anxiety about taking a shower or checking your phone or enjoying a moment of relaxation, let's start looking at it as that's not paranoia. That's your body keeping the score of all of those small cuts. Your feelings are evidence, even when the behaviors seem like they're too small to matter, because they're small enough that they do matter to you, even if they don't matter to somebody else. Maybe one more big takeaway, the importance of validation, because I think a lot of listeners write in saying some version of I thought I was the only one, or I didn't think anybody else would understand. But these small wounds are designed to isolate you because they seem so minor to other people. But today we heard for the 8th installment how universal these experiences actually are. And I have plenty more that I could pull for and when episode 9 happens. What can you do? Share your story, whether in a support group or with a therapist who understands narcissistic abuse or the emotional immaturity or the podcast community even. When we share these small stories, we help others understand that they're not alone, that they're not crazy, and that these death by 1,000 cuts relationships are very real and they are very valid experiences. Because I just want you to remember that no single paper cut's enough to make you question your entire relationship. And that's exactly why this form of emotional abuse is so effective. But understanding these patterns, trusting your experience, your gut, and sharing your story can be really powerful steps toward healing and starting to reclaim your reality. And then one more thing that I want to talk about. and I think this is crucial, self-compassion. Last week over on the Virtual Couch podcast, I had my associates and friends, Nate and Marla Christensen, on, and we talked about the importance of self-compassion. And I highly recommend that episode, but it's based off of the work of Dr. Kristen Neff. And Dr. Neff is an associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin in their Department of Educational Psychology. And she's been credited with conducting the first academic studies into self-compassion. And her research shows that self-compassion is not just being nice to yourself. She has 20 years of data now that show it's about treating yourself with the same kindness that you would show a good friend. Because think about it, if your friend told you that they were feeling anxious about taking a shower in their own home or nervous about smiling at their phone, would you tell them that they're being too sensitive? Of course not. Or if you would, but you're being a weenie. And I worry that too often when people do hear things like, would you talk to your friend the way that you talk to yourself? People in my very office have said, yeah, actually, I think I would. Well, again, it's a jerk move. So hopefully you'd recognize their pain and you'd validate their experience. And this is especially important for survivors of death by 1,000 cuts types of relationships, because we've often internalized the message that our feelings they're too much, or that we're overreacting. And guess what? You are not too much and you're not overreacting. Your feelings are there because guess what? They are. So remember that self-compassion, it has 3 key elements: self-kindness instead of self-judgment, recognizing that recognizing our common humanity instead of feeling isolated, and mindfulness of our emotions instead of avoiding them. So this is especially important for survivors of the death by 1,000 cuts types of relationships, because we've often internalized the message that our feelings are too much or that we're overreacting. And guess what? You are not too much and you're not overreacting. Your feelings are there because guess what? They are. And self-compassion has 3 key elements: self-kindness instead of self-judgment, recognizing our common humanity instead of feeling isolated, and then mindfulness of our emotions instead of avoiding them. Because when you catch yourself thinking, I should be over this by now, or why am I so affected by such small things? Pause. Acknowledge that your pain is real and that you're not alone in these experiences, and that your feelings are a natural response to the ongoing emotional trauma. And your sensitivity isn't a weakness. It's your humanity showing through despite somebody else's attempts to diminish it. You are okay. You're not broken. You're human. This is the very first time that you are going through life as you. Check that out. Because you are this beautiful combination of your nature and your nurture and your birth order and your DNA, your abandonment, your rejection, your hopes, your fears, your dreams, all of these things that make you you, because you're the only one who knows what it feels like to be you. Now, sure, we grew up needing validation from our parents. We grew up afraid of this abandonment, and we worry that if we're alone, we will die. But you're going to be okay, and you're going to start to figure these things out. And a big piece of that is learning how to trust yourself, trust your gut. And even if that doesn't mean you're necessarily taking action on things today after listening to this podcast, you're just now starting to know what you didn't know before. And that is part of this process of becoming, or this path of enlightenment. You didn't know what you didn't know. Now it's so hard to implement things, or what do I do? And over time, you're going to do the things that you are learning about more than you don't. And at some point you become. And that interior landscape of your mind, or what it feels like to be you, this concept of the implicit memory, which is based on the slow residue of lived experience, will start to change. And I promise, this is the part where one cannot lead someone to a place that they've never been before. And I want to promise you that when you really invest in this work on loving yourself, self-compassion, self-care, that over time, what it feels like to be yourself is pretty good. And your default can change from the what's wrong with me, or I don't even want to engage in life, or I don't want to deal with these uncomfortable things, to I am present. I will figure this out. Check that out. These are thoughts and feelings and emotions. And I'm going to grab hold of the ones that I think are really helpful and productive to me, because I'm aware of who I am and what values I really want to go after in my life. So if you have questions, thoughts, experiences, please reach out to me at contact@tonyoverbay.com. I would love your stories of the death by 1,000 cuts. I hope you will find me on Patreon, and let's continue to go on this journey together. And I hope you have an amazing and wonderful week. And I will see you next time on Waking Up to Narcissism.